Great. So thank you so much for having me today. Very excited to be here. It's the end of the day. I'm going to try to keep it high energy, wrap it up in about 20 minutes so you can get on with the rest of your evening. Thank you so much again. My name is Ryan Rosenberg. I currently work at Sanofi. And just a little bit about myself. For the past 20 years, I've been working in the digital design space, with the majority of that time at some of the pharma companies that we all know and love, like BMS and Merck, and currently Sanofi, as I mentioned. I'm really fascinated by the emerging trends in digital marketing and its intersection with healthcare, and how we can use those trends to improve the lives of patients and those that serve patients, including payers and healthcare providers. But before I go any further, I have to have this disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are that of the presenter and should not be attributed to the presenter's employer. Okay, here we go. So on a daily basis, our customers, whether they be patients, HCPs, or payers, are constantly surrounded by our messaging and marketing. And with all these touch points are stitched together, we create that feeling of a positive customer experience. But this is really hard work to do, as we all know. And while I've worked on a lot of these different touch points around customer experience, today I'm going to focus on just one. And that is the design and the process of creating a positive customer experience online. Good design is just a tool to communicate. But the critical thing about designing websites, and most any touch point that's often overlooked, is that the design must be driven by the needs of the user of the website you're designing for, not the brand manager, not the team that's paying for the project, but the user. And to create meaningful online customer experiences, we must identify our users, talk to them to find out what they want and need, and then design that solves their problems. And I'll argue that doing this upfront discovery work with our users is even more important in the healthcare space, because we don't have the luxury to learn and iterate quickly. Everything we do has to go through the medical, legal, and regulatory process, and it takes a long time to get anything to market. So we need to make sure that we do it right the first time. And to do this, we use a process called user-centered design. This process puts actual users at the heart of the design process. I won't go through every phase of this process, but I do want to focus on the 2 points where users are involved. And that's at the discovery phase. And you'll see that in the big red circle on the left, where we work to build empathy with our users to find out what they want and need from our product. And this is done through exercises like interviews and persona creations and user journeys. The second time we engage our users is in the validation stage, when we test our web designs to make sure they allow our users to achieve what we want them to do. Designs are essentially a hypothesis and need to be tested to ensure that our hypothesis is correct. Engaging with the user is the most effective way to create a meaningful customer experience online. However, many times we see a process more like this, right? Perhaps as a brand manager, your creative agency presents a wireframe for a website, and then they jump right into the final design. The website is built and then it's launched. The user, whether it be the patient, the HCP, or the payer, is mentioned as being very important. However, no work was done to find out who they are and what they really want and need. And without that upfront work of building empathy, you're putting something in the market that's unproven and untested with the very people who will be using it. We would never consider doing this for a TV commercial or a master visual aid in pharma, right? But for some reason, it's okay to do this for a website. It seems odd to me. But there's reasons that a user-centered design process is many times not followed, and we see distance from our actual customers. The typical hurdles that face us are time and cost for this methodology. It takes time to source actual users, interview them, go through the exercises to build empathy, and then create prototypes and test our design assumptions, iterate based on user feedback, and test them again. And there's typically high costs associated with doing this work. You may have to hire an agency who can perform the research and produce the findings. Then you need to pay an agency to possibly produce multiple prototypes to test. And this could add weeks or tens of thousands of dollars to your website timeline and budget. So today I'm going to talk about a way that I've used in prior engagements to lower those hurdles. Not completely remove them, but lower them to free up resources, time, and money to perform the critical work of user discovery. What if we could dramatically lower website design and development costs, which can then free up some of the needed time and dollars to conduct those very important online research activities like user-centered design that could then be reinvested to power a meaningful online customer experience? A way to do that is to create a design system. We want to get away from this idea of creating pages or even websites in a vacuum. We want to create a holistic design process that can be applied to any website across the entire company. And now you're probably asking yourself, why is there a Lego guy on screen? Lego has made its business out of creating design systems, modular, reusable building blocks whose only limit is your imagination. You can rearrange them in any order you need to achieve what you're trying to create. And that's how we want to think about web design, not starting from scratch every time, but rather using a series of reusable web parts called components that could be arranged on screen to best tell your brand story. Now, I just want to pause quickly here and give credit to my build partner in the last slide. And although she thought it was pretty cool that we're putting together Lego for work, she was not too happy that I kept taking photos of her doing it, but that's what parents do, right? And so a little fun fact for you, by the way, did you know that the plural of Lego is not Legos, it's Lego. So make sure next time you talk to your kids about Legos, you say Lego. Design systems are now used across the digital landscape and tech space to help companies create a more standardized user experience and design at scale with a common visual language. Here are some of the well-known companies that use design systems, and they all have a pretty cool name for their design system. And in many companies without a design system, these are the common pain points you'll see. Rediscovery at the beginning of every project. This means zero knowledge sharing from project to project. It's incredibly important for healthcare websites where we know we need to have mandatory elements like prescribing information and important safety information on screen. But for every website project, we argue about where it should go every single time. Brand and agency alignment. Every brand is aligned to a different creative agency, and they all have different ways of working. And without a centralized knowledge base, that could lead to complete chaos. And custom development. Highly customized development work impacting timelines and budgets. No reusability, starting from scratch every single time. But design systems can solve those problems. From a design perspective, design systems aid creative agency partners by answering questions that typically arise at the early stage of the design process, so they can move quickly into the creative and messaging phase. From a development standpoint, design systems remove a significant portion of the development work by using those pre-built components, those Lego bricks. And agencies, from a regulatory standpoint, agencies can move with confidence and proceed quickly that the design system reflects the latest regulatory guidance, like where that prescribing information should be and where the important safety information should be. And from a user experience perspective, standardization of user experience leads to users being able to achieve goals quickly across multiple websites. All right. So at a high level, this is the process that we followed on our design system to achieve significant cost savings, and that was a discover, build, share, and govern model. Depending on the organization and the scale of the current digital ecosystem, I've seen it take upwards of 2 years for a design system to be fully embraced as the new way of working. But once it did, the results were dramatic, and efficiency shot up while costs plummeted. Now I'm going to explore each parts of this process. So we always start out with discovery, and the first thing we want to do is what's known as an interface inventory. And this is an examination of all the pieces and parts that make up a different website in your digital ecosystem. Things like video players and buttons and navigational elements, headers and footers. And what we're looking for is to capture something called design debt. across the ecosystem. And design debt is all those inconsistent elements that we introduce into a digital ecosystem over time when we add pages or we add content to a website. So this collection of buttons is from a single banking website. And you can see all the different button styles, shapes, sizes, colors, very little relationship to one another. And each one had to be custom designed and built. And each one costs time and money to do. You'd also be able to find design debt at the page level as well, as you do your inventory. Here's a good example of 3 website search results pages, all from the same company, but different brands. Each one of these pages had to be custom designed and built, leading to unnecessary costs and timing impacts. Now, this is a search results page. Is it really necessary to have a different experience in every search results page? I don't think so. So another thing you may notice when doing an interface inventory is similar design patterns that start to emerge when you look across the entire ecosystem. One interesting thing that I noticed when I was doing an audit for a client was that even though all of these websites were designed by different agencies at different times over a period of a few years, they were all very architecturally similar in terms of layout. The brand was different, but architecturally, how the website was built and laid out was very similar. So you could see they all had that horizontal header going across the top in the purple bar. They all had a horizontal navigational element that's in the orange. They all had a horizontal hero area directly underneath the navigation that carried forth the messaging and the photography. They all had a promotional or CTA call to action area directly under that in the aqua, and directly under that they all had the area for important safety information. It's pretty standard for a pharma website, right? But it was incredibly time intensive for each of these brands to get here. So this level of sameness screamed out to me for standardization and said to me, this could be a common layout that we built into our design system. We then took our findings and our proposal for a design system to our stakeholders, including brand managers, our regulatory colleagues, and creative and development partners. We wanted to hear their needs, and we wanted everyone to feel ownership of this process from the very beginning because we knew it would be a new way of working. We held 2 one-half-day workshops to identify the most important components, those Lego bricks, that would need to be built for version 1, a minimum viable product of our new design system. And after all that discovery and all that work, this was our output, a boring Excel spreadsheet. But this really gave us a good sense of what needed to be prioritized in our first release of our new design system, and then what could be later released in subsequent versions of the design system. Design systems are not a set it and forget it model. There would be an initial release and then a regular cadence of updates and releases after that, based upon needs and as different guidance that was given over time. So after we discovered what was needed, we set about building the components, those Lego bricks again. That would be the initial building blocks of our new design system moving forward. Excuse me. This included things like, on the left here, you'll see all the components, right? So these are things like a standardized header with a predefined location for a brand logo, a link to prescribing information, important safety information, and a footer with standardized links to privacy policies, legal disclaimers, things that are on every website. We developed one standardized video player, not the 4 we had before, and standardized buttons, call to action modules, hero components, tabs, accordions, all those pieces and parts that you would need on a standard website. And to really accelerate the design process, we built a series of templates that design agencies could use just to plug in their content and speed a website to market. All right, so let's pause here a moment and talk about the T word, templates. We were not expecting the blowback we received when we released these. We heard things like, but won't that stifle my creativity? Templates automatically signal constraint, inflexibility, and everything that we as creatives are trying to avoid. But let's face it, we work in pharma. We are already in a pretty tight box. So it's a matter of creatively working inside of that box. Templates can dramatically accelerate the design process, so agencies do not have to start from scratch every single time. A lot of best practices can be built into the templates themselves. So on the left, you'll see things like minimum font sizes, no more microscopic type on websites. This is vitally important for older users who may be suffering from vision problems due to advanced age or their disease state. Button sizes, we standardize that as well. Did you know that the average human fingertip is the size of 48 pixels? So what do? We standardize our buttons to be 48 pixels tall. Makes sense, right? And skipping ahead a bit, this was the full design system ready to share. Desktop and mobile templates, a component library, those Lego bricks, along with design principles, a training guide so creative agencies could self-train, a digital playbook, a governance model to ensure that the design system was being used correctly. And after we built everything, we moved into the share phase. We conducted full-day workshops with creative agency partners and development partners to teach them how to best use the design system. And we published everything in one folder, a single source of truth. So when we made updates to the design system, everybody knew that was the place that they needed to go to find the most recent. And after we shared everything, our governance process began. My team had standing meetings three times a week to review any and all creative layouts before they even got to the brand managers. And during these meetings, we would help the creative agency partners course correct and stick to the design system. This is vitally important, as the last thing we want is anything to hit the desk of the brand manager for them to fall in love with it and then to learn that it's not in the design system and it's going to blow up their budget and it would have to be custom built. So that checkpoint of seeing things before it gets to the brand manager is vitally important for a design system. And recognizing the design system is a living process, we then went back to the discovery phase to find out what could be improved, what is not working for our creative agency partners, and what further enhancements our brand managers want to see. And after applying the design system to more than 30 different websites over the course of a year, we saw some pretty impressive results. We consistently saw creative and development costs decrease by around 40%, and our speed to market increase by around 25%. The design system enabled us to recapture dollars and time, which were then reinvested back into research and discovery, which informed a more meaningful customer experience. And in the end, it allowed the brand teams to move closer to those that mattered most, our customers. Thank you.
Hey, Ryan, that was great. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Sure.
Nice to see you again.
Good
I
to see
want
you
to
too.
say congratulations because I know how much work that has been, and I know what it takes to finally get templates to be not a bad word. Absolutely.
Yes.
I loved the phrase design debt. That was something where I'm like, that's a really good way to frame it up in that you're just distracting everybody's attention by all these differences. So why not, be more solid in your approach, right?
Yeah, it's very similar to development debt too. And this happens over time as you add pages to a website. There's different developers working on it. Spaghetti code gets introduced. Yeah. Things get overwritten. It becomes a mess, right?
Like just patchworking, and all of a sudden you have a giant quilt of nothing looks the same. So yeah, I love it. Yeah. And that's it. I think you always have to sort of take a step back and look at it from a big picture and say, wait, we have to just sort of regroup again. I love too that, we were templated. I love that template's a bad word, but we're templated without even knowing it. So it was really good to bring that to everybody's notice that it's pharma and we all do the same thing. So like the creativity comes in how you put it together. And that's really a great example.
And our thinking was that let's pay the creative agencies for what they're really good at, right? Which is the messaging, which is the imagery, which is the campaign.
Right.
Let's get past focusing on where the important safety information should go or where the link to the prescribing information should go. Let's pay them what they're really great
Yeah,
at.
I love that. I have one question for you before Seth breaks us down for leaving. Was just, so for when you have, do you have any tips for how to get a brand team to say, yeah, I love it, let's do it? Like, how did you get people on board in the beginning? Because that's a hard part. And that's, if you're not ready for it, what's a tip to kind of get the conversation started?
You do, yeah.
Before happy hour is starting.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, what we found is that it has to be like a show, don't tell model of having a brand team kind of work with you to explore this concept. Maybe one that you know, that doesn't have hard deadlines to get a product to market, or is going through a refresh and it's maybe a smaller brand, right? To where maybe they don't have the money to engage a creative agency that could do the whole thing, and they're screaming out for templates and standardization, right? So work with a small brand team, show, don't tell, have them be kind of your test case, and then kind of grow from there, right? And also, it can be from a top-down idea of whoever controls the digital ecosystem. Your head of technology, your head of digital says, hey, this is something we've got to do because the costs of web design and development are just out of control.
That's true. So like finding some key partners just for that base use case. That's great.
Yeah, it can be bottom up or it can be top down.
It can meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
This was awesome. And I will pass it over to Seth next to take us to the last panel of awesome discussion with non-traditional markets.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a second. I did have a question for you, Ryan. You showed us that slide that had 100 different button designs on it.
Yeah, that's the debt.
Right. And we're talking about, templates and how templates are a bad word. But when you take a look at some websites, you know, everybody sort of follows the herd. You know, a couple of years ago, it was really like the Apple, the minimalist design that was, you know, very popular. And then people started going, you know, like scrolling and different things like that. And I'm just wondering, from your opinion, if we all use a familiar design, let's say, does that add to the UX or does that take away from the UX? Are you blending into the crowd, or are you increasing the engagement because people are familiar with it? You know, my website looks like this one that I'm familiar with, and then I go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right? It depends on the overall strategy. But let's say for healthcare providers, they're extremely busy, right? They're moving from patient to patient. Maybe they need to find out about the prescribing information for this one medicine, or they need to find out about dosing, or they need to find out about a mechanism of action or whatever. Shouldn't that information be in the same exact place on every website in your franchise?
At least in your ecosystem,
So that level of sameness, I think, is good because it allows people to navigate quicker if they kind of know your.
And within your ecosystem, yes, I was just kind of thinking of
no, but even in pharma, I think even in pharma, because if we're thinking about the ultimate customer experience, that they end with that ease of finding the information. It's not about, then the content becomes what you have to deliver, and the quality content or the product, and it's really based on what, you know, that's really what they're looking for. The website design should be simple and easy.
Simple and easy. I like it.
Or there's no right answer.
Seth, just let us be right.
One of these conferences will actually solve this problem, but I don't think it's going to be today.